What's going on YouTube? It's Primitive here, bringing you episode 4 of PokéPrep. This is the series where I give you all the tips and tricks that I've learned through my many years of competing to help you become a better player and make sure that you're getting the most out of your time whenever you're practicing. Today's topic is going to be how to identify the flaws and weaknesses in your game and how to fix them. So this is going to be broken down into two phases. The first phase is going to be the identifying phase, which is what we're going to be talking about right now, and the best way to identify your flaws is to start taking notes. You want to be taking notes both while you're practicing on ladder as well as when you're in a tournament match, as they both are going to give you very crucial data. When you're taking notes, you want to make sure that you're really looking at the games and starting to identify the real reasons why you lost. Sure, there are going to be some games where you lose to hacks and other RNG chances, but you'll be able to find out that just because you had RNG factors in your game doesn't mean that's ultimately why you lost, because you could have taken other steps either in the previous turns on team preview or in the team building phase that would have prevented this RNG from affecting the game and allowing you to win. I'll shortly be going into the most common problems that many players have and talking about how to fix them, just to give some examples of what you're going to be looking for while you're identifying your flaws and taking notes. But just know for now that what you're going to be looking to take notes on are areas of the game that you notice that may be weak that you want to improve upon to make yourself a better player. And now the second phase of this plan is reviewing and planning. Once you have a large sample size of notes from many games and many tournament sets that you've played, and you have a good idea of what areas you need to improve upon, this is when you go into the second phase and you start reviewing and figuring out what your most important and most crucial problems are, so you can start planning out a solution that you can implement to help fix these issues. Now it's going to be much easier for me to explain this by showing you the examples that we have, so let's get right into these examples of the most common habits that players have that cause them to not have the results that they're looking for and that they look to improve upon while using this note-taking and reviewing process. VGC is a game of knowledge and prediction, and with that being said, many players try to go for very prediction-heavy games, but sometimes those predictions can really bite you in the butt if you get them wrong or if you really start to overthink the situation that you're in. So if you're consistently being a predictive player but find yourself getting a lot of predictions wrong, instead of blaming your opponent and telling them that they made a bad play because they didn't do what you thought they were going to do, you should start looking and making sure that the predictions that you're having are actually correct to do. You want to make sure that you're weighing the pros and cons of your play. If you're going to go for a play that would put you really far ahead if you do get the prediction correct, but will put you very far behind if you get the prediction wrong, you're going to want to go for a more middle play that's going to make sure that you are at least getting something done and not just falling ahead. This does change if you are very far behind or if you're very far ahead. If you're very far behind, you're going to want to make more risky predictions to try to get yourself back in the game, which may make you not want to weigh the pros and cons, because you don't get it right, you may just be losing anyway, and in that case, the risky play is fine. But when you're ahead and you're trying to make predictive plays, you're giving your opponent a win condition by you mispredicting and giving your opponent a chance to get back into the game by you essentially wasting a turn. You also want to make sure you're learning as much about the metagame as possible. You want to understand what your opponent's team and archetype are trying to do against the archetype that you're playing and what their options are. The better you understand what their game plan is, the better you're going to be able to understand how to play against what they want to go for, which will make it easier for you to make predictions because you'll have a better understanding of what their win condition is. And if you can identify if you're ahead or behind, you can make more informed predictions and make sure that you're not just making crazy predictions that could just put you behind, instead making sure that you're solidifying your lead. Another issue that holds a lot of players back is them playing too quickly. Whenever you're playing too quickly and not using your full time allotted, it's going to cause you to have multiple issues in your play, such as select your moves too quickly and not fully think about what your opponent's options are and what they can go for. This will cause you to potentially misplay because you may select a move and just a couple seconds later you may realize, oh wait, no, they can go for that. And then they do go for that and you end up falling far behind because you decided to rush your play instead of giving yourself the extra 5, 10, 15 seconds that the timer allows you to think through your play and make sure you're selecting the most optimal play that you can. It'll also increase your potential to misclick. If you're rushing to click your buttons right away, you may accidentally select the wrong Pokemon, or even worse, select the wrong move, or even if you're super unlucky, you may accidentally select your own Pokemon. I've seen this happen to many players, even myself. I've clicked moves too fast and misselected, and having such a silly mistake lose you a game is not something that you want. You want to make sure that you're thinking through your plays and selecting the right buttons that you need to win the game. One of the best ways to work on this is to start talking through your plays out loud. Since we're in the online era of VGC, where most of the tournaments are going to be played in your own bedroom, you can go ahead and just talk out your plays to yourself and make sure that you are fully thinking through your opponent's options and not rushing yourself. You actually speak a lot slower than you think, and so if you actually speak it out loud, you'll be slowing yourself down, which is going to ultimately make you be able to think more clearly. You also want to make sure that you have flowcharts planned out beforehand against all the best archetypes, so that way that you at least have a general idea of what you want to do, what your opponent wants to go for, and what your and your opponent's win conditions are. One of the biggest reasons that many players hold themselves back is because they blame hacks too much. The facts are, you are not the most unlucky player of all time. You do get good RNG, you do get hacks that goes in your favor. However, you are just choosing to look at the negative more than you are choosing to acknowledge that you do get good hacks from time to time to even out the bad hacks. Whenever you do get good hacks, you probably just see it as some sort of justice or karma, saying, I finally get some good luck in my way, instead of having the same weighted emotion that you do for your bad RNG that you do for your good RNG, which ultimately is just going to put you in a negative mindset that makes you think that you are just super unlucky. You need to understand that there is hacks in this game. You are consciously choosing to play this game, and when you do that, you are setting yourself up to potentially get hacked out. If this is causing you too much anger, too much tilt, then you may need to step away from the game from a bit, get yourself back to a neutral emotional level, or you may just need to realize that maybe this game isn't for you if it's really affecting you that much. Now, I'm not trying to make anybody leave the game, but you need to understand that your mental health is extremely important. If this game is causing you that much stress, then you should consider taking at least an indefinite break until you can relearn to love the game for its flaws and its strengths. But with that being said, blaming hacks is not going to help you get better as a player. There are almost always ways that you could have played the game or built your team different that would have helped prevent that hacks. To give a quick example, let's say you get consistently flinched by Landorus Therian and you just think that you have the worst luck when it comes to rock slide flinches. Well, if it's that common for you to get rock slide flinched by Landorus, then maybe you should look at the team that you're using and figure out why this is such an issue for you. If you don't have any Pokemon that are outspeeding Landorus Therian, let's say a Trick Room team, then you may need to realize that you need to get Trick Room up more consistently to deal with, which may mean running Fake Out or running Wide Guard, both of which will prevent Landorus from using Rock Slide for a turn to help you get up Trick Room so that you're faster. If you're not using Trick Room and this is still a problem, you could maybe look at what your Landorus Therian counters are, and if you don't have any, then that's actually going to be a flaw in your team building that you need to get fixed, because you are knowingly weak to a certain RNG and not fixing it in the team builder. You are just hoping that you don't get flinched, which is not a reliable strategy, as to where fixing your matchup against that Pokemon is an actual reliable strategy. A good way to fix this is going back to the notes that we were talking about at the beginning of the video. Start noting what went wrong and why you were in the position to where you could have got hacked. Maybe your opponent led a lot better than you, which made you have to do a lot of switching and repositioning, which gave your opponent some extra time to start potentially landing critical hits, flinches, or even start spamming some sleep powders. If that's the case, then maybe you just need to realize that you didn't have the correct information on that matchup and led incorrectly, which stalled out the game, gave your opponent more time, and maybe you would have been able to win that game if you led better and actually been the aggressor instead of being on the defensive end of that game. Maybe you made a bad switch and didn't fully understand what your win conditions for the late game were and lost a key piece to your team, which caused you to then be weak to Landorus's flinching, which maybe you made a bad switch in and weren't fully understanding what your end game was and lost a key piece to your end game that caused you to then be weak to Landorus's rock slide flinches and put your opponent in the position to then get favorable RNG to win the game, as to where if you didn't make that incorrect switch and lose such an important Pokemon, then you would have been able to take care of Landorus and negate any rock slide flinches. I encourage you to look at all these RNG games that you lose for what they really are and find out if you really lost RNG or if there was something else that you could have done different to prevent that. It's going to make you a much better player in the long run, because not only are you going to be more deeply analyzing your losses, but you're also going to be looking for ways that you can improve your game and improve your team instead of just blaming hacks and moving on to the next game. Another issue is playing too aggressively or too defensively. When you're playing too defensive, you could fail to have enough damage output to actually have a win condition. Playing defensively is also extremely weak to RNG. Playing defensive means prolonging the game and giving more turns, and the more turns you give your opponent to hit you with moves gives them more chances to flinch you or crit you or paralyze you, etc. Too aggressive of a playstyle can also be a negative, because you'll be setting yourself up with too many frail Pokemon, and also if your team revolves around just one or two sweeper Pokemon, if those Pokemon get knocked out, you may not have a win condition any longer. The best best way to get around this is you're going to want to have both offensive and defensive elements to your team. So that way you can be the aggressor when you need to be, and you can also slow down the game whenever that's necessary. Switching teams too often can also be a problem. I'm a big advocate of trying out as many different teams and learning about as many different archetypes as you can. However, if you're switching teams too frequently and just every 5 to 10 games you're switching teams because you're not winning all of your games, then you're going to be failing to actually gain any knowledge about that matchup and how to actually operate that team. And the more you switch, the more you're just going to get frustrated and start tossing aside more and more archetypes that could be the fit for you, but you're not giving enough time to fully learn and develop the matchup knowledge to make that team succeed. If you take a team from somebody who's winning a lot, but then you start to lose with that team, the answer is not to just toss it to the side and say the team sucks. It's to start giving it a fair chance to learn what the strengths and the weaknesses of the team are, figure out where you're going wrong and why you're losing the games. So that way, even if you don't end up liking the team and wanting to continue with it, at least you're gaining the matchup knowledge and the team knowledge that is necessary to learn how to beat that team. And learning how to operate as many teams as possible is going to make you a more flexible player. And the more flexible and knowledgeable you are at the game, the better of a player you're going to be. And the last one, and potentially the biggest one, is tilt. Every player is going to feel tilt eventually, but there are ways to train yourself to beat tilt. Now, there's a lot of things that could go into this, but I am going to keep it very short because tilt is such a complicated subject that it's going to take you a lot of your own studying and a lot of own trial and error to figure out what's going to be best to fix your own tilt. The first thing you can do, though, is figure out what your tilt type is. If you read the book The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler, you are going to be able to find the 7 different tilt types, and you'll be able to identify what tilt you suffer from. And once you know the base causes of why you're tilting, it's going to be much easier to fix. And another thing you can do is set in tilt rules for yourself. Tilt rules are things like if you lose 3 games in a row, you have to take a break to help prevent tilt. Or if you start to feel tilt, you have to go on a walk or you have to go do X. Whatever it is that makes you feel better and get less tilted to be able to continue playing with your maximum mental fortitude. But you want to make sure that you are actively training yourself to beat tilt, because if you aren't, then you're just going to continue to get tilted, and tilting is one of the fastest ways to self-sabotage yourself and make sure that you aren't performing as well as you want to be. Alright, well that's it for today's PokéPrep. Thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in more VGC improvement content, I'll have all my socials linked down below. Down there you're going to be able to find my Twitch, my Twitter, and my blog, all of which are going to have consistent VGC improvement content uploaded. On my blog you'll also be able to find all of the other PokéPrep episodes if you are interested in reading them in text format. If not, then don't worry, all the PokéPrep articles are going to be coming here to YouTube over the next couple weeks. But on my blog I also have many other VGC improvement articles on how to fix your preparation, your mindset, and your team building. So if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend you check that out. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.